Good afternoon, everyone. Both mics working. Is that fine? Cool. Thank you so much to our hosts. Jurgen, thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. And then thank you for all the attendees. Um, I would like to thank you for just allowing me this space because I think you're all experts in your own field, and it's nice for me to be able to step out of my day job and sort of get back into my headspace of being a techie and actually impart some form of knowledge or knowledge sharing on you in terms of my experience, both as a technologist and the way in which we use Bizagi. To Jurgen's point, during COVID, I was fortunate enough to sort of do my MBA with a specialization in artificial intelligence. So I do love the talk about AI. I love that they're using it, all the technology. To some of your questions around OpenAI, the OpenAI platform that they're using is obviously through the Azure portal. So if you do interact with that, you get all the new features, similarly to like as your platforms as a service sort of evolve through their roadmap, you get all the capabilities inside that. Azure South Africa is pretty mature. So from a language perspective, we've tested it a few times with different languages. It's good, not great. So when you translate like to Afrikaans or Xhosa or any of the other languages, it's not a one-to-one, and they don't quite have that yet. But I think as they progress through that, you will have similar capabilities. In terms of the voice one, I don't know. Coronation is not sort of like a brand voice thing, but you do have the ability to sort of tailor the AI to what you need it to do. And then it's very good at training and learning. So whether you're using it inside Bizagi or like in your Bizagi apps or wherever, it's pretty neat because it's sitting on top of the OpenAI platform. So to begin, yeah, so I'm Samir. I'm head of software engineering for Coronation. I've been with Coro for about 11 and a bit years. For a company like Coronation, the thing that's very important for us is, now the mic's on. Coronations, like we always see ourselves as sort of punching above our weight class. Not many people know how we operate or just how lean we operate from a business perspective. Coronation's been in operations for about 30 years. Globally, Coronation between South Africa, Dublin, London, as we sort of spread out a little bit, we are about 330, 340 people globally. So if you compare us to other large asset managers in the country or on the continent, I think our assets under management is around 620, 630 billion rand. So if you spread that across sort of the resource pool at Coronation, you can understand that something like operational efficiency is absolutely crucial for us, right? The way in which we sort of define operational efficiency, and again, it might vary depending on what your organization, how your organization depicts it, or how many staff you have. But for us, it's very much about doing things smarter with less people and better. So there's an element of continuous improvement, but also continuous evolution. The business area that I lead, so there's two of us, there's two senior managers, my partner who's not here today, but between the two of us, we sort of lead a very large department. Given the headcount globally of 320, 330 people, our technology team alone is 80 people. So a quarter of our company is actually dedicated to technology implementation, acquisition, retention, maintenance, support, running our business as usual, running our tech roadmaps, etc. So it's a very large and crucial part of our organization. And everything that we do is in line with one of two objectives, right? So which tie back to our core values of our organization. The first one being performance, long-term investment performance, and then excellence in client service. So I'm not going to pretend like I know enough about investments to tell you how our investments are run, but we have a very good team and they talk about it all the time. And I think being able to stand here after 30 years sort of speaks to me thinking that they know what they're doing, so that's okay. But on the excellence and client service perspective, I think the important part there is what we try to do is create an integrated but efficient environment, right? And there are various ways to do that. So I, I'm going to try and tell you how we did it. May work for you, may not work for you, but it's just a knowledge share. Operation efficiency for us is not just sort of about cost savings. I think that's something that can come with operational efficiency with time, but it is about improving speed, and it is about having greater accuracy, having less exception management processes, and then just better compliance. So, I mean, I know this is in financial services, so most of you operate in a financial services organization, and compliance is a non-negotiable. So a lot of the processes that we've automated using Bizagi have workflow and approvals, and they branch out into compliance to mitigate that risk. Sorry, I just want to switch into... Apologies, it's in the wrong mode, so... It's good now, thanks. So, there we go. So why does operational efficiency matter? And again, the touch points here are just about doing things smarter, right? So you want to have your operational efficiency translate into cost savings, improve speed, better compliance, and then greater accuracy. And you get that by automating repetitive processes so that you can free up your team to do more high-value tasks, and also to reduce human error. So when there's a lot of human error in your process, your output's only going to be as good as the input. So if you have issues in your input, you're going to have issues in your output. Strategically thinking, if you think about any insights that you want to be able to draw throughout your processes in terms of from a data perspective, so bottlenecks, efficiencies, etc. If the data going in is nonsense, the data coming out is going to be nonsense. So why Bizagi? And what is Bizagi? So for me, I'm going to give you the definition of what I think Bizagi is. So business agility, I thought that was very smart. I remember the day we went to Old Mutual to have a look at Bizagi, which was, I think, probably bordering on a decade ago. They had already established some workflow processes at Old Mutual, and through our due diligence process, we went out to Old Mutual to have a look at what Bizagi was. And that was sort of my first introduction to business agility, and as it was defined. But Bizagi to me is a business process automation platform, right? I know in the newer terms and what you've seen there, it's very much a digital transformation tool, but we've used it as a business process automation tool. It is also a rapid application development tool, so something that Seb showed you on screen, like it's very quick to get something up. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the processes we have. We have very simple processes. That arguably the best thing we get out of it is the lack of manual entry and the ability to sort of collaborate across departments. And then we have exceptionally complex processes, and it caters for both, right? Something that Seb touched on as well, which I just want to reiterate, is Bizagi is a low-code platform, right? So we'll come a little later on to some of the sort of action items, key takeaways from my experience with it. But it is a low-code platform, and it enables that quite well. But where we've seen good efficiencies is the way in which you use Bizagi as a BPM tool from a business process modeling perspective, before you get into actually designing the process and looking at how you operate. So if you sort of start down that route of designing and going through the analysis of your process, using Bizagi at that point in time, whether you're going to end up having an app or workflow process in Bizagi, that's great, but you might actually just find inefficiencies in your operating procedure. And that's one of the benefits that we found coming when using Bizagi. So Bizagi is an exceptionally easy tool to use. Okay, so when we embark on a process to like an RFP process, and we're going to go and find a tool that we want to use, we go through a very rigorous due diligence process, as most of you probably do as well inside your organizations. So to give you context of where Bizagi fits in at Coronation, at Cora, as a pure asset manager, we've got back office, middle office, front office, our transfer agency. We've got every facet across asset management, from trading through to operations. So in order to run an organization like that, you have many fit for purpose tools, right? At Cora, we run between 45 and 50 different platforms across our organization. So that's from ops, trading, security, whatever it is, there's different platforms. We only have one BPM platform, and that's Bizagi. And that's because, not just from a consolidation perspective, from a technology perspective, it's just, Bizagi just works. Okay, so for Coronation, it absolutely just works. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the processes we have, and then I want to talk to sort of the tactical and strategic benefits of Bizagi and try and bring those two together so you can get an understanding of where it fits in at Coronation. So this is an overview of some of the processes. I had a lot of screenshots, and it was definite death by PowerPoint, looking at our workflows, and then our compliance had me remove all the workflows. So I'm just going to talk through some of our processes. The first one being our personal account trading. So being in asset management and having very strict rules around the ability to trade on your personal account, we find that ensuring the trades are executed like with the right oversight and approvals before was a very manual, drawn-out process. So if I wanted to execute a trade in my own personal capacity, I would have to email someone in compliance, email someone in our dealing desk, cut the price, get everything done, remove to our investment team. From there, depending on where we were in the cycle with trading for a client, I'd either be able to buy or not, and that would be via a broker. So they'd give me a compliance broker note, which I'd be able to pass on to my broker. They'd be able to go and execute for us. All of that is automated. Today, if I wanted to execute a buy of an all mutual share, I would log on to Bizagi, create a new trade, give them the value, tell them how much I want. It would then make its way to our dealing. They would check any embargoes. So from an asset management perspective, we're not allowed to trade when we're trading in the same stock for a client, because we have to put the clients first. And then also just to prevent things like inside information trading. So because I have access to all the information, if for whatever reason I wanted to acquire a new stock because of information I had, they'd be able to validate and then reject the trade. That's sort of an example of a very simple process at Coronation, but it works, right? It gives us sort of very strict guidelines and standardization in our personal account trading process. Every process looks the same. And then also from a compliance perspective, we adhere to very strict rules. Research invoicing, very sort of similar flow of information. The nice thing here is this starts out with a process sitting on our trading desk. So we'll get research via our trading desk, information will flow into the organization. It would then move from step one into the next, which is sort of like an approval step. And that's where they determine, they ratify it, right? So they'll say, okay, cool, this research was worth it. This is the invoice associated with it. From there, it would actually move all the way through into our finance system, and they'd be able to track that inside the system, inside Bizagi. So they're able to consolidate all that cross-departmental flows of information in a single sort of a unified interface, and then have a state or an understanding of where it is in the process. So we'd be able to report back in real time based on where we are with our process, where we are with payments in the system. And that sort of has helped us out quite a bit. but it's also helped the brokers out because they get paid faster. So from an invoicing perspective, we've got something in place to be able to pay our invoices within 30 days. It's one of those processes that streamlines that process and actually allows us to stick to that SLA. Instrument setup process. So if you have any idea around how middle office and front and back office tie together, you'll understand that setting up new instruments and the amount of complexity when you're trading new instruments on the market is absolutely manic. So this process, it's fairly complex and touches on about 4 different departments, including compliance. Before Bizagi, this was a manual process. So I know most of you would think that this is capability that should exist in an EDM or an MDM system. Many of them don't have the ability to integrate workflow into an organization and then back out and move between different systems, etc. So you end up having to build peripheral systems to cater for that capability. Bizagi was a natural decision for us where we abstracted that. So the instrument setup process for us touches on before an instrument is created, whether we can trade it or not. It touches on pre-trade compliance. It touches on whether we're moving into or fetching data from our front office or from Bloomberg or one of the other sources to enrich information. And then it moves into our EDM system to say, this is a new security, it's coming up, it's been approved, and you're allowed to trade on this. So before the T-cycle can kick in, all the data is in the right place. From a market perspective, everything is streamlined and everybody's on the same page in terms of what type of data or whether we are allowed to trade that and what type of data is going to flow into the organization. So I'd classify that as sort of like a high complexity but a medium process. Proxy voting, so streamlining the task of managing proxy votes for our shareholders. So as an asset manager, because we hold stocks as proxy on behalf of our clients, we have to execute on the voting for that. Being able to manage that, as you can imagine, is quite a feat. There's many systems out there that can do it. What we do with our proxy voting is actually just is sort of fetch data from the actual voting systems, bring it in, consolidate the reporting on that, and then we pull that data out and it goes into a machine learning model that classifies the data for us so that we can provide our stewardship type reporting. So at any point in time, from a real-time perspective or whether it's batch, we're able to classify our data. So a few years ago, a big keyword or buzzword on the market was ESG, and everybody wanted to know what ESG reporting looked like. That was a simple process for us because we had all the data available. The data was good, it was clean, and we were able to classify our data using AI. Client take-on. So this is, in my mind, our behemoth. So the first process that we automated using Bizagi, and probably I'd say out of everything, the one that brings the most return on investment. So our client take-on process is just that. It's the first process that interacts directly with our clients. So as an asset manager, usually there's some level of outsourcing in terms of client engagement or client experience. At Coro, we own the full client engagement journey. Right, so what that means is any communication going out to a client comes directly from Coronation. So when we do a client take-on or when a client registers at Coronation, they go through the client take-on process. As at, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago when FIC amended the Act to include KYC, AML, AVS, fraud detection, and a myriad of other things that we had to do from a regulatory perspective, we were able to actually meet our deadline much before time, test everything, and run the process as if it was the same process that we did beforehand with no operational scaling from a resource perspective because it was running through Bizagi, it was running through our workflow system. So I'll talk a little bit from to a design perspective there, but where we also were able to find scale in it is conventionally that was built for a retail investor. So at Coronation, we've got retail and institutional investors. A large portion of our retail book comes through our advisors and our IFAs. But any direct interaction from a retail investor perspective goes through our client take-on. So whether it's a new investment, a new client, an amendment to an investment on an existing investment, static detail changes, or any client instructions goes through our workflow. And when we designed it with a person in mind, so not an investor. The concept, if you used to reference models, the concept of a party, right? So you design it using a party, and what that allowed us to do when the need arose from a FICA perspective to scale out was to treat institutional clients in the same way. So actually today, both our retail and our institutional client take-on process, both for new amendments, everything goes through the same process. We're able to scale out for FICA without doing any changes operationally from a business perspective because the system was able to do it. So whether you're a director, authorized party, or UBO, any relation to an entity or an investor, you get the same treatment. You're going to go through KYC, screening, risk, fraud, or anti-fraud, or fraud prevention, AML, etc., through our client take-on process. The way in which our client take-on process is designed, I'll talk a little bit later on about it as well, is Bizagi is very good at orchestrating business process and interactions between systems. So we have an abstraction layer, right, where we abstract behind APIs, whether it's interactions with third parties, whether it's interactions inside our own network. So all we actually do with Bizagi then is orchestrate the right movement inside the organization, either between queues or people, departments, or processes or sub-processes. But that does allow us, because of the design, and we've worked with Bizagi on this, because of that design, to be able to scale out. So you essentially just scaling those processes. Something that Jürgen mentioned earlier is you don't get charged by your licensing, you get charged by your execution. So if your execution is efficient, your cost is efficient. So regardless of the size of those type of processes, right, I think each of them have their own sort of complexities. And I'd like to sort of just touch on the tactical and the strategic benefits of using Bizagi when you are automating. So firstly, you're looking at like reduced manual work. I think that is critical to automation. Right, so by using Bizagi to automate the processes, I think we've significantly reduced manual work involved internally. We automate routine tasks. We've minimized the amount of human error in our processing. So something Zeb showed us earlier with the AI bot that reads emails that then pushes data into the system. We use that type of capability as opposed to having people read emails, recapture information, and then sort of deal with the downstream impact of human error. And the challenge with that is human error can result in very costly financial operations. So it's reducing manual work, but actually probably in the long term saving us money. Improved process visibility. I think this is another benefit. So as I mentioned earlier with the research invoicing and any process actually in Bizagi, at any point in time, you can tell the state of that process. So we have full visibility of where we are in the process with any of our processes and the consolidated view of those processes. So if you take the client take-on process as a holistic approach for a day, right? If you're an operational team and you want to understand whether you're meeting market cutoffs, whether you're going to have bottlenecks in the process by the end of the day, whether you're meeting your targets on whatever KPIs you're supposed to have, you have that ability because that's what Bizagi enables you to do, either via the query system, as I've showed you, or via dashboarding and real-time reporting. We fortunately, from an implementation perspective, we license for the ODS, which means we're allowed to extract data out of the ODS and data warehouse that. So we do that and we consolidate data from Bizagi and some of our other systems to tie that up into our client engagement system. Faster turnaround time. So, I mean, streamlined workflows mean that tasks are completed faster, naturally leading to better efficiency. And I think very importantly is the compliance adherence. So when you look at it from a compliance perspective, automation means every task follows the same process. So yes, there's going to be permutations where things branch out or move into different permutations, but it always follows the necessary regulatory guidelines, right? So we've got built-in rules based on the regulations that we have, and Bizagi enforces those rules. So there's no discretion in our process, or at least little discretion in our process. When it is a strict process and you sort of governed by hard regulation, then you want to make sure that your rules are robust and resilient, and standardization and sort of that ability to manage your rules in a central location speaks wonders. So that works well for us. And we're able to enforce that from a regulatory process perspective. But then on the other side, we're able to report on that from a compliance perspective. So we're always able to pull information out and have sort of consistent reporting from an audit perspective or for compliance reasons. Lastly, tactically, I think error reduction is a major win. So by reducing the reliance on sort of manual data entry and then those physical handoffs of processes, most organizations still operate quite widely with email. I know we do, but before processes were automated, email was sort of like the way in which you communicated between departments and were hoping that people took the accountability and had the same urgency and criticality in the process that you did. But we know there's a lot of risk associated with human intervention. So ensuring that a process is automated and using a tool like Bizagi, we reduce our errors, we minimize the risks associated with human intervention, and then we also ensure the data accuracy across those processes. Again, coming from a place of strategically, when we want to be able to draw insights out of our data, out of our processes to understand if we're operating efficiently, if we have bottlenecks in our process, we're only as good as the data inside the system. So if it's designed optimally and you have accurate data, there's a good chance that the insights that you're drawing out of that would be of high quality. And then I think beyond the sort of immediate tactical wins, there are very clear strategic advantages to automating processes. For us, one of the biggest ones is scalability. So again, for a lean organization like Coronation, where we do not want to increase our headcount, right, especially not for the sake of it, as our organization grows from whether the goal is growing assets under management, growing client base, or whatever strategic approach we take into to growth that's not headcount, being able to do that without the need to scale resources is absolutely crucial to the sustainability of our business. And Bizagi has allowed us to do that. It's allowed us to be able to deal with much higher volumes without the need to either scale infrastructure or scale people. And the important part there is there's a big gain and a big ROI without the significant growth on the manpower side. So we don't need more people to execute on what we do today. If we were to scale out, both from a client take-on perspective or any of the processes internally that we needed to, we would not need more people because the system handles it and our operational processes are designed around efficiency. Process standardization. So I think in my world, this is a strategic advantage. Again, all processes follow a very consistent workflow. And it doesn't matter who on the team is executing that process. So again, maybe a challenge with having a very lean organization is if we do have very limited people with very set skills, if those people are on leave or off ill or something like that, it's very difficult for just anybody to jump onto it. And this is where standardization in your processes come in. So if your processes are standard enough and, again, designed simplistically enough, then anybody can execute those processes. You're going to have sort of make a checker type orientation to it. So it's not like at the end of the line, you're going like, cool, whoever did it had enough discretion to be able to bypass the process. It doesn't work that way. So for us, that's worked quite well. So it does lead to sort of smooth operations, but also improved collaboration amongst the team members, and then reduces the risk associated with any errors in the process. Coming to cross-department integration, spoken about it before, but I think processes like our client take-on, we've seen this strategically work out for us. If you take a client take-on process, it is operations team, client services, the legal team, the finance team, the banking team, the transfer agency team, we work inter-company as well when we hand off over to our transfer agency. So all of those actually operate from within inside one process. So we break down all of those silos and we enable collaboration across them using a standardized process. Data-driven decision-making, coming back to what I was saying earlier around enhanced data accuracy. So strategically, when I look at processes, I'm able to sort of extract the information and have a good indication that the quality of the data is high and that I can use that to draw any insights out of it. To Jürgen's question around sort of AI is very good, especially generative AI, at being able to tailor that using conversational, like using a conversation. And I see a benefit there for us where when we have our operational managers running certain exception management processes, so if they wanted to understand how many large flows we had for a day, it's usually log on, get a query, get the information, draw it up, as opposed to actually just logging onto a space where they can go to an agent and go, tell me how many large flows we had today, and it will bring that information, summarize it, pivot it, do whatever it needs to do, and then have the ability to extract it into Excel if they needed it in Excel. Operational agility. So again, coming back to our process for FICA, we were able to pivot and be very agile around our operational processes when FICA amendments kicked in. And that's because the Bizagi is a flexible tool. So when markets change or regulations change, if your business process needs to be tweaked and amended with the right level of governance, so versioning and whatever else you need to from a technology perspective, Bizagi is able to do that, and it's able to do that relatively quickly. So you, by sort of automating, and the benefits that we've seen from a BPM perspective with Bizagi, we were able to gain operational agility relatively quickly. And then something that's key to us with sort of all platforms and systems that we have is being able to use new features. So can't remember who mentioned it, but I think Bizagi do 2 releases a year, right? Those new features, if you want to be effective with your platforms, mean when you're looking at designing or redesigning your processes, is try and incorporate those features. So the example I use now with the generative AI, that's a big jump for us on the operational floor to be able to use something like Ada to fetch information in real time, as opposed to going in, extracting information, and then sort of making or drawing insights out of that information. Very conscious of time, so I'm going to jump straight into sort of some of the key takeaways for us. My experience with Bizagi, it's obviously been like almost a decade, I think, not yet. And I always enjoyed the wizard and the approach to how you do things in Bizagi, because it forces you to go down a certain part of the process. You've got to start with the design and the BPM and then move on to the data model, etc. But what I found for us was the optimal process, and I mentioned this earlier, doesn't mean it will absolutely be automated in Bizagi. We use Bizagi's modeler to actually map out other processes in our business and store those models, because it just works. At a later stage, if you do find efficiencies in going, okay, cool, this can be a Bizagi process, you already modeled it. But what it does allow you to do is actually just take a more governed approach to mapping out your business processes. We've got a team of business analysts that solely use this business modeling tool. And what I found was the software engineers on some of our other systems are they can read it very easily because it's standard notation. So even just collaborating across departments in that regard, using the Bizagi modeler it's quite efficient. And then being an OG techie, going back to sort of designing databases and backend models, etc. I think what's been very crucial for us is ensuring that we have a solid data model. And the reason for that is Bizagi's front end is very coupled to the data, right? It's very coupled to the data model. So we, again, because we've got abstraction, we have APIs, and we interact with lots and lots of different systems through our orchestration. but ensuring that you design or you design your data model and you take the time to design your data model like effectively upfront is going to be crucial, because whatever data you have in the system is the data you're going to get out of the system. So if you design your model with the outcomes in mind and you are very clear about what information is being captured throughout your process, you're able to then get back to that point where you can draw insights out of your data and be very effective operationally. Again, standardization. So focus on creating standardized, reusable process templates. What we found in one of our processes is you sort of design and you build, and then you realize that something that you've built is a reusable template. So something like, simple example we've used is abstraction of email communication, right? So that we weren't tied directly into SMTP or something like that. We go through a service to do our communication. What that meant was we never ran into issues with Microsoft's SMTP rollout of their security changes, etc. We were able to abstract that and then reuse that business sub-process throughout our other processes. So it's important to think about that and also think about where you can find efficiencies with those. And then for me as a techie, I think probably the most important part is the engineering side. So low-code platforms are great, rapid application development tools are great, but we treat them as fully managed builds in implementation. So we give it the same rigor that we do with any other build if we were to go down the route of building, and that is you set and apply standards to your implementation. Bizagi is incredibly flexible. So if you're looking at interacting with services or even throughout your process flow, you have web service calls, you have actionable calls, you have expressions, you can import libraries, and all of those things have overlap in terms of what they're able to allow you to do. And if you leave that to an engineering team, they're going to run wild and innovate all the time. So it's basically just set those standards. You would do it with any other build, treat Bizagi in the same way. So that's probably the most key takeaway for me. And then training. They mentioned earlier there are partner models in South Africa. So I'd encourage always to look at the partner models, see how they can help you sort of drive implementation. But training skills internally is very important, both from a business user perspective and your technical team. Having adequate skills in the building will always serve you well. And then just very, very quickly, I know I'm out of time. Around some of the lessons learned is simplify. Like, don't simplify and maybe scrutinize at the same time. Is don't redefine your automated processes exactly as they were when they were manual. Is put in the effort to scrutinize the manual processes and then come back and simplify your process, because like I fully understand, like as an executive, you have to take people on the journey. That's all good and well, but sometimes they just know the way that they can only see it in sort of a siloed view. They know how they operate. You need to be able to take that step out and actually just be a little bit more prescriptive, and they will see that. I mean, they'll see the benefit afterwards. Continuous improvement. So something that we do well at Coronation is we always reviewing our processes. Something we're forced to do because we run so lean, but we're always reviewing our processes and we're always looking to optimize our processes. Again, business agility, it is inside the Bizagi's name, but it does allow us to sort of adapt very quickly. And then the two last points are sort of very technical, but an abstraction layer architecturally, I'm sure Mutual will agree to this. I think that's quite crucial when implementing platforms. And then the cloud-first approach. Just something we learned a little bit the hard way is we were always on premise, and we've sort of still in some of our processes are being migrated into the cloud. But the on-premise version of Bizagi was very service-orientated. So it had, if you're running on a Windows system, there were all these background workers and services running and executing processes and transitioning data in the background. That concept doesn't exist in the cloud. So if you're designing a process today, whether you're designing it on premise or in cloud and PaaS, just take into account that, like, design it for the cloud. And I think that will sort of enable you to upgrade faster, be a little bit more agile than we were when we were on premise. But that's it. Thank you so much. what we do is we have a backlog of what we call like a technical backlog, right? And the idea is our technical teams work with our business teams. So most of the time during implementation, they're sitting in the analysis, the design, they're sitting with our business users. So they actually become SMEs and they understand the business process as well as the people that are executing on it. So often what we find is they identify just almost organically and they go, this is inefficient. Speak to the business users, sit with the business users, see if there's room for adaptation. And then we've also got a sort of a business solutions hub where, so we've got two hubs, one from an innovation perspective and one from a business solutions perspective. And those are analysts, and their goal is for us to go strategically. We'll be like, we're thinking about doing this. Go off, branch out into the organization, have some conversations, and they'll bring that back. Yep. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.